can elements and chaos ever be organized into a world of reason, stability, and beauty without a divine standard of measure? Mesoamerican archaeologist Garth Norman said this about standard measure.
Clearly, since man began constructing things, he has measured. Standard measure is almost as basic as language for trade and developing civilization. Without it, trade would be chaotic, and development in the arts and sciences stifled. Linear measures are a natural resource for standard measure, especially the foot and arm, as were used in the Old World. The familiar Near Eastern cubit, back of elbow down to fingertips, has been traced back to the 3rd millennium BC in Egypt and Mesopotamia.
The Babylonians adopted the 49.5 centimeter Royal Babylonian cubit as their standard of measure in art and architecture. The Egyptians used the 52.5 centimeter Royal Egyptian cubit. Standard measure allowed these ancient cultures to sustain complex economies that made great advancements in art, technology, and science. But what about the New World and the Maya, an innovative civilization known for its advanced architecture, sophisticated writing technique, and intricate calendar system? What many don't know is there may be a connection between the Maya and the Old World. Welcome to Izapa, a pre-classic Maya archaeology site in Chiapas, Mexico, celebrated for its advanced architecture, masterful monuments, and sophisticated solar calendar alignments. Might Izapa hold a key to revealing a connection between the Maya and ancient Egyptians and Babylonians? Archaeologist Garth Norman explains the importance of Izapa.
The importance of this archaeology site relates mainly to its remarkable preservation of its low-relief narrative sculpture that was part of the original temple center design and construction in the 3rd and 4th centuries BC. The monuments were never destroyed. Unlike other pre-classic temples, it was never built over. With Izapa, we get a unique look into the Mayan past, and what shaped that magnificent culture.
One of the most notable monuments at Izapa is Stela 5, also known as the Tree of Life stone. Created by the ancient Maya civilization at Izapa, the stela, which dates back to around 300 BC, is carved with intricate symbols and iconography that tell the story of life's journey to partake of the fruit of the tree of life. In the 1970s, Norman, while studying Stela 5, made a groundbreaking discovery.
Initially, I wasn't trying to find an ancient standard measure, just comparing related figures. But my carpentry and construction experience with measuring persuaded me that the ancient artisans and architects must have used a standard measurement system. Length, width, and height measures of figures should reveal any use of standard measure. I detected early that different figures on Stela 5 were the same height. Further examination led to discovering some parallel figures that had the same height or width. Later, expanding the measure study to all the monuments at Izapa, I found matching spacing between sky and ground panels on practically all of the 35 carved monuments. Remembering researching the Mayan literature, I pondered the ancient book of
Chilam Balam of Chumayel.
Here are footprints. Measure it off with your foot. Then our Lord, God the Father, measured his footstep. This was the count.
Looking at the god foot on Stela 5, I had an impression to measure it. What we discovered was astounding. It was the width of the tree of life. The severed tree branch measured 1/2 the god foot. The distance between the old man's elbow on the left, to the umbrella on the right, was 8 God feet. And the distance between the base panel and sky panel was 8 God feet. A pattern was emerging. Then we measured the Pan-American standard measure found at the top of the stone. It was 4 God feet, which measured 49.5 centimeters, the Babylonian cubit. Cubit measures are well known in the ancient Near East, from Egypt to Mesopotamia and with the later Greek and Roman empires. Dare I even imagine a possible connection across the Atlantic?
The archaeologist went on to measure 16 other Azapa monuments and found the distance between the lower base and sky panel on these stones were all 2 Babylonian cubits.
Now, with excited fervor, I measured everything at Azapa: heights between panels, figures, proportions of figures, hieroglyphic motifs, and full stone heights and widths. I did not stop there. I measured the entire temple center, mound to mound, perimeter, north-south axis, east-west axis. Everything was measured and a clear pattern emerged that the Azapa temple used standard measure from the longest measure to the smallest detail. My esteem increased profoundly for the ancient Azapan artisans who had taken extreme care to measure with precision as they designed the temple complex and patiently chiseled their hieroglyphics into these massive stone monuments. Nevertheless, there was another unexplained mystery. Some Azapa monuments had a standard human figure measure that did not fit the royal Babylonian measurements. This led to another startling discovery. The dimensions indicated, an additional, standard measurement was used. Measuring the mathematical layout of figures on Stela 5, I found the artisans at Azapa used the Royal Babylonian cubit standard for horizontal details, and the Royal Egyptian cubit for vertical measurements. The full system of measurements and increment unfolded on Azapa Stela 4, a half-life-sized priest-king standing about 3 feet tall. The king figure's height from the ground panel to the top of his raised scepter was 2 royal Babylonian cubits. The distance between the ground panel and Venus glyph was 2 royal Egyptian cubits, which follows the discovery that the Egyptian cubit was predominantly used for vertical heights.
The discovery of the Royal Babylonian and Royal Egyptian cubits as a standard of measure in the design of Azapa suddenly brought Mesoamerica together with sacred spaces found worldwide. Dr. Stephen Skinner said,
Almost all ancient peoples created their temples and other sacred spaces with careful reference to correct numbers, geometry, and proportion. Geometry governed the very movement of the heavenly bodies and the seasons. Geometry in its purest, simplest form is sacred circles, squares, and triangles.
Overlaid together, the circle, square, and triangles form a mandala, a design framework used in Egyptian and Mesopotamian art. Having uncovered the use of ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamian measurements at Azapa, Norman wondered if Mesoamerica could have also used the mandala.
I began with the Mesoamerican art of Azapa, to see if Egyptian geometry was employed. I drew a circle and square with diagonals, as demonstrated by Brun's Middle Eastern geometry study. I overlaid the geometry onto pictures of Azapan figures and monuments. I found the singular Stela 4 priest-king figure was in a golden mandala geometric format. This Stela 4, a carving dedicated to a single figure, seems to portray a stubby ill-proportioned, sun priest-king. However, with the geometric overlay, the king-priest shows that his regal proportions fit the Old World secret geometry. His placement within the circle and square are fixed by the ear spool axis as well as his full height on the vertical axis of the apron and wing tip. These confirm the underlying geometric scheme. From the same contact point to his ear spool is 1 royal Babylonian cubit, 49.5 centimeters, and from that ear spool, to his belt mask's ear spool is half again. The measurements confirmed the geometry. The geometry confirmed the measurements. While tracking cubit measurements across stela 5, other structural features began to emerge. When overlaying the Mesopotamian mandala, suddenly the narrative of stone began to be revealed. Large numbers of carved straight lines connect with the golden mandala node, then translate as opposites. This full geometry with the cubit connection enters a whole new dimension.
Izapa is the cradle of the Maya civilization, where Izapan artists used the Babylonian and Egyptian cubits and the Mesopotamia mandala to design and build the Izapa sacred space. These discoveries have revealed a compelling connection between the Old World and New World. In addition to Izapa, the Babylonian and Egyptian cubits measurements have been found throughout North, Central, and South America.
Whether or not ancient seafarers could have crossed the Great Seas is no longer a question. Babylonian and Egyptian cubits used as measurements in the construction of antiquities in the Americas, beginning in Mesoamerica, and spreading to South and North America, coupled with the use of Middle Eastern mandalas, demonstrates that the true fathers of Mesoamerican antiquities were influenced by those from the regions of the Mediterranean Sea.
Indeed, ancient human connections across the globe are evidenced by the cubit measurement and mandala geometry. For more detailed information, we invite you to read the book, Cubit Connection, available on Amazon.com. Thank you for joining us on our journey of discovery.